In this quick skills video, we're looking at converting between percentages, fractions, and decimals. It should be a skill you already have, but this will be a quick overview. Okay, we'll start off by converting from percentages. Remember that percentages really means parts of 100. So every time we see a percentage, it means that value over 100. So for example, 20% is the same as saying 20 over 100. Now we're going to use this to convert from percentages to fractions and also for percentages to decimals. Okay, so it's as simple as saying that x% will be equal to x on 100 to get a fraction, and then it's just a matter of simplify. So break it down to its simplest fraction. We'll look at an example in a minute. With decimals, it's the exact same rule, so x% is equal to x on 100, and just when we're converting it to a decimal, then we're jumping that decimal place 2 to the left. Alright, so let's look at 74%. 74% will be written as 74 on 100, and we can simplify that down if we like. It has a common factor of 2 that we can see easily. So if we divide the top and bottom by 2, then we get 37 on 50. There's no more common factors, so our simplest fraction is 37 on 50. We'll use that same value, 74%. Okay, so we know that's 74 on 100. If we jump that decimal place 2 to the left, then we get 0.74. Okay, so that's our percentages as fractions and also percentages as decimals. Nice and simple. Okay, next we'll look at converting fractions to decimal and fractions to percentage. Now the easiest approach, and that's what we'll stick with, the easiest approach is to first turn that fraction into a decimal. Once you have it as a decimal, it's easy to convert into a percentage. Okay, so a fraction and decimal are technically the same thing, they're just shown in a different form. So if we're trying to convert a fraction, let's say first of all, we'll look at converting something really simple, 1/2 into a decimal. Now the idea is that really we're just looking at half of 1, or 1 divided by 2. So 1/2 in this case is simply 0.5. So that's an easy one, that's one that everybody knows. If we make it a little bit more complex, let's say now we go to 1/8 into a decimal. Without just using a calculator, we can break this down a little bit. So we can think about that 1/8 as 1 on 2 times 2 times 2. So really what we're looking at is 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, or a half of a half of a half. So we've just broken up this fraction. So now we've got 0.5 times a half times a half, 0.25 times a half, and we've got 0.125. So 1/8 as a decimal is 0.125. Okay, now this works with a lot of scenarios. Some of them you may find it easier to remember the decimals. When it gets complex as well, you can use a calculator to find some of those decimals as well, or use your long division. Now, to convert a fraction to a percentage, the easiest process is to first convert to a decimal, and because percentage is parts of 100, then we have to multiply by 100%. So I'll go back to these same problems. We want to show 1/2 as a percentage. Now we know that 1/2 is equal to 0.5, and when we multiply that by 100%, we jump this decimal place twice, so 1, 2, and we get 50%. When we look at 1/8 as a percentage, then we know that 1/8 is equal to 0.125. And when we multiply that by 100%, we jump that decimal 2 to the right again, we've got 1/8 is the same as 12.5%. Yeah, so nice and simple. Converting fractions to percentages, as long as you can convert fractions to decimals. So finally, we'll look at converting decimals to percentages and decimals to fractions. We've already looked at decimals to percentages as part of fractions to percentages. So decimals to percentages is simply you need to multiply by 100%. So 0.325 will be equal to 0.325 multiplied by 100%. So now we've got 32.5% when we jump that decimal place 3 to the right. Okay, decimal fractions is also pretty straightforward. We need to be able to multiply the top and bottom by a value that results in an integer or whole number. All right, so the denominator and numerator both need to be integers or whole numbers. So, for example, if we wanted to turn 0.25 into a fraction, then we think of it as 0.25 on 1. Now, in order to get whole numbers on top and bottom, we need to multiply the 0.25 by something. So I can see that if we multiply that by 4, we get 1. So we'll multiply by 4 on top and bottom, and we're left with 1 on 4. Now, that's already in its simplest form, so we don't have to simplify that fraction at this stage. Let's say 0.02 into a fraction. Okay, so sometimes it won't be obvious as what you have to multiply the top and bottom by. So we could multiply this by 50 on top and bottom, but if we didn't see that, if we've got 0.02 on 1, we know if we multiply 0.02 by 100, it jumps that decimal place 2. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to, then we end up with 2 on 100. Then it's just a matter of simplifying. We know we can divide top and bottom by 2. So we've got 1 on 50. And there we have it. We've got 0.02 converted into a fraction. Okay, so that concludes the skill video.